Marshawn Lynch actually got his hands on an official.
Oh, boy. Oh,
He's
going to get tossed, I bet. Watch him run from the sideline. Watch him right here on the sideline. He's going to come running in right there. Yep. There's a chance he gets tossed.
Well, he did get tossed. That was Tony Romo from last night. Marshawn Lynch, I mean, what are you thinking? Welcome to SI Now. It's Friday. Maggie and Robin closing out the week with you. Robin, Marshawn Lynch got himself ejected from what became an incredible game on Thursday night. But should he also be suspended?
Look, what Marshawn Lynch did last night is kind of indicative of why everyone loves him so much. He came out to protect his quarterback running onto the field. Apparently, he finished the game in the stands and then took the train home. With all that said, I absolutely believe Marshawn Lynch should be suspended. Not because I think he did anything particularly egregiously wrong, but if I'm the league, I can't allow a precedent to be said where you can grab an official by the scruff of his collar. So I know they don't have an official rule in place about contact with an official, but for me, running from off the field and making contact with the official in the way he did has to be met with a suspension.
This is not the definition of egregious, isn't it? I mean, maybe not an egregious hit, but it's an egregious action, as you said, running from off the field. And I know it's really quaint, and Marshawn Lynch, he cannot speak to the media, and we all think it's funny. He can give the double middle fingers, and we all think it's great. And there is a different set of rules, it seems like, for Marshawn Lynch than almost any other player in the league besides perhaps Rob Gronkowski or something. But you can't get away with something like this. I agree. I think you have to send a message here. I mean, you have referees who are going to be in a very vulnerable position. I'm not saying Marshawn Lynch hauled off and slugged him across the face, but you can't have him grabbing somebody. It's intimidation, and the referees have to keep control of the game. Also, don't you have 6'8", 330-pound offensive linemen out there to protect your quarterback if something like this happens? Marshawn Lynch should just stay on the sideline. And I think what's going to happen here is that we see this terrible rule in the NBA where if you leave the bench at all, you're immediately ejected from the game. And you don't want to have that happen in the NFL. But if it does, we can all point back to Marshawn Lynch and say it's because of you and you running on the field on a Thursday night game that we now all have this rule.
Meanwhile, elsewhere in California, it was an underwhelming debut for Lonzo Ball and the Lakers in their LA matchup with the Clippers as the Clips won 108-92, and Ball finished with 3 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists. He was hounded all night by Patrick Beverley, who had this to say about what the rookie should expect in the NBA.
I just have to set the tone, man. Yeah, I told him out the game, man, due to, all the riffraff his dad brings, that he's gonna get a lot of people coming at him. He has to be ready for that, and I let him know after the game. But, what a better way to start with Mr. 94 feet guard tonight,
Man, how much do you embrace?
I'm not done. Welcome to the little young guys at the NBA.
Maggie, just how much pressure is on Lonzo Ball?
Oh, so much more than I ever even imagined there would be. I thought there was a shred of hope for Lonzo's sake, that maybe other NBA stars would look at him and perhaps feel a little empathy. Like maybe they had a dad who was also, really outspoken when they were coming up through the youth ranks or maybe in college. And maybe they'd say, it's not him, it's his dad, and we can separate the two. Oh, no, they're not separating the two. These guys are going to go after Lonzo all season long. And maybe Patrick Beverley would have been one of his toughest assignments, if you will, for the entire season. It just happened to be on opening night because Beverly's such a good defender. But no, this is going to get so much worse, especially because guys are going to go after Lonzo. It's going to be like a cottage industry of trying to shut down Lonzo Ball. And I think if LA thought that he was going to be the attraction that was going to lure a lot of big-time free agents next season, I don't know if they're going to be thinking that.
I don't want to be too hard on his individual performance. I actually think he did some things well, like throwing outlet passes up the floor to get the offense going. The problem is the Lakers need Lonzo Ball to be special. So we all know the LeVar Ball aspect of it. I'm going to put that to the side, even though that's the biggest reason, as you heard Patrick Beverley. The Lakers have had a bunch of top-flight draft picks, and they actually don't have that much young talent to show for it. Brandon Ingram is approaching bust status already. I'm not that impressed by Julius Randle. D'Angelo Russell isn't there. So they need Ball to be special, especially if they want to attract one of those top-tier free agents, as you mentioned, because looking at the roster and the situation as currently constructed, I don't see any reason whatsoever any star free agent would go to the Lakers other than it's Los Angeles and it's the Lakers, and that hasn't worked in recent years.
And also, I think that's overrated at this point. When you have Oklahoma City is able to attract the kind of talent they can, I mean, the big market doesn't mean what it used to. Just look at the Lakers and look at the Knicks and the Nets. So I don't know if that holds the same appeal, but you're right that they need Lonzo to be special. And obviously, the comparisons are not fair, even if LeVar's making some of them about Steph Curry and stuff like that. But the big comparison was Jason Kidd. And I think people thought that Lonzo was going to be like Jason Kidd from his rookie season. You go back to Dallas, and I don't remember Jason Kidd's first ever NBA game, but his first season, he averaged 12 points and 7 assists per game. You knew what he was going to be from the very beginning.
Well, Jason Kidd's a basketball genius, and you see that Lonzo sees the floor very well, but Jason Kidd doesn't get enough credit for his athleticism. I've heard comparisons like Lonzo's a more athletic Jason Kidd. That's not true at all. In fact, the thing I noticed the most is I think Lonzo needs to get a little bit stronger.
Yeah, the whole team, really. They won 26 games last year, though. What were we really expecting? Meanwhile, congratulations. Let's stick in L.A. to the L.A. Dodgers. They're back in the World Series for the first time since 1988, the days of Kirk Gibson and Orel Hershiser. But what is the Dodgers' biggest weakness, Robin? Because we believe they will be favored over either the Yankees or the Astros.
Well, let me preface this because it's not meant to be a hot take or anything like that. I think the biggest weakness is Clayton Kershaw, because when they announced Clayton Kershaw to be the Game 1 starter, I don't then necessarily say, oh, the Dodgers have Game 1 in the bag. That's a win for them. They've been a great team all year. They are the favorite going into the World Series, whether it's the Yankees or the Astros or whomever. But with Kershaw on the mound, because of his playoff, it's not futility, but because his playoff performance hasn't lived up to the standard of his all-time greatness in the regular season, there isn't that mythology about him taking the mound.
Personally, I think that Kershaw is going to change that narrative about himself in this postseason because the Dodgers are just so good. You're trying to look for a vulnerability there. It's so hard to find one. They won more games than anyone in Major League Baseball, and they really plugged a lot of the holes and the deficiencies that had plagued them in years past, where they've made the postseason 10 times since 1988, and they haven't been able to win a World Series or get back to the World Series. You know, what they did is it's been so impressive. So here's my one small weakness. I'll just get to the point. I think you have to keep an eye on Corey Seager. I know that they were resting him because they felt like they perhaps did not need him to get to this point, but he was the most reliable bat in the lineup before he suffered his back injury. So Dave Roberts says he's going to suit up for Game 1 of the World Series, but will he be perhaps a liability? That's really the only thing I can find that could be one potential weakness for the Dodgers. If you're a Dodger fan, I think you have to feel really good about your chances. Well, the irony that the best game of the season so far came on a Thursday night after we've been criticizing those games since they began in 2006. Can't believe it's been that long. Let's welcome in Jenny Prentiss of the MMQB for more reaction to the Raiders' 1-point win with no time left on the clock. Jenny, Oakland snapped a 4-game losing streak. What does that mean win for the Silver and Black?
Yeah, for them, I mean, basically it was I don't think it's going too far to say it was a season-saving kind of win because, you know, they had fallen into a pretty big hole. A home loss in the division was just something that they couldn't afford. And, you know, the Chiefs are coming in. They'd only lost 1 game this year. So for the Oakland to beat them and to get that home win in the division was not just, you know, to end their own skid, but it was to say, hey, we can still compete in this division. You know, we obviously did well last year before Derek Carr's injury. This year has been off to a slow start, but it was kind of a statement to the rest of the division. It is wide open, and that Oakland is still in the mix.
Now, when you talk about the Chiefs, Jenny, they were probably the consensus pick for best team in the NFL 2 weeks ago, maybe even a week ago. Is the bloom off the Chiefs' rose at all?
Well, you know, I think when they started out undefeated, there's always a little bit of that pressure, you know, of not losing a game, you know, kind of staying on top of the standings. I think you did see maybe that impact a little bit. I know they addressed that on the broadcast last night, and I think there's some truth to that. I think the big question with the Chiefs right now is the defense, which is interesting because before last year was always a little bit the offense. Can they score enough points to keep up with these other teams in the AFC? You know, this year you see Alex Smith throwing deep balls more often. You see this really explosive Chiefs offense, and yet the defense, which has always kind of been the hallmark of the team, gives up, you know, more than 500 yards to the Raiders. So I think what you saw last night, you know, that defense has a lot of talented players on it, but the loss of Eric Berry in week 1, we sort of forgotten about that because the Chiefs kept winning games, but I think that's showing up. And I also think, you could say they're playing a little bit below the talent they have. They have a lot of really good players, starting with Justin Houston up front, Marcus Peters on the back end. And so I think for the defense to give up that final drive, I think that was, kind of a gut check moment. And I think the defense kind of fixed some of the issues that they're having.
Moving around the rest of the league, Teddy Bridgewater says he'll definitely play this year. Is that your expectation, and how badly do you think the Vikings need him back?
I think with these things, it's always hard to say what will happen when a guy's coming off such a serious injury like that. Obviously, his optimism is a good thing. He's gotten good feedback from the doctors. It's really impressive that a guy who 14 months ago was taken off the field in an ambulance, his NFL future uncertain, for him to even be back in practice is a boost to the Vikings. And perhaps he will play this year. They have that 3-week window to determine whether or not they put him on IR or keep him on the active roster. And he's obviously got to show enough during that time. But as you know, you can never really be sure what's going on until you test the knee. So he's got to test it in practice. He's got to test it with unscheduled movements. What happens when someone's coming this way, in an uncontrolled environment? That's the only way to see how the knee will respond. And then even still, you really won't know how the knee responds until it's hit, until you get pretty live action. So I think there's still a long way to go for Teddy Bridgewater, but it's a huge step that he's back in practice. And if he is able to play for the Vikings at the end of this year and then potentially in the future, that certainly changes the hopes and expectations of this team.
Yeah, I think they're probably looking at that Aaron Rodgers injury and thinking maybe they have a shot. They sit in first place in the division and coming off 2 straight wins. They host the Baltimore Ravens this weekend. Jenny, waking up the day after Super Bowl 51, we couldn't wait to get a Falcons-Patriots rematch. It does go down on Sunday night. Are you as excited for this game as you were perhaps in February?
I think the Falcons' losses the last 2 weeks took a little bit of the luster off this game. It seemed like they were starting well to the season and then obviously blowing that 17-0 lead against Miami last week, the loss to the Bills. So there's questions about, now they're going into this game. It couldn't be worse to go into a game against the Patriots having blown, obviously not as significant and meaningful of a lead, but they still are coming off a blown double-digit lead, just last week. So, it's not quite, it doesn't have quite the intrigue, obviously, as we would have thought it would have had in February. But, it's kind of it's an interesting point because I remember right after that game, Ricardo Allen, one of the safeties on the Falcons, was talking about just how, he wasn't sure how he was going to get over it. And I think the Falcons did a good job this year. They addressed it head on. Matt Ryan and Dan Quinn talked about getting over the 28-3. They talked about kind of grieving that and moving forward in the offseason, and then they made a decision to move forward. But I think what you never really know is how well a team actually will respond because, we think we saw it most recently. The best example I could give is the Seahawks with, losing Super Bowl 49 from the 1-yard line. They've never seemed to have the same team chemistry after that happened. So the challenge for the Falcons was to try to overcome that. And, so far, I think the last few weeks, especially, we've seen that I think those scars are still pretty deep. And, going into Foxborough now, it's, they're sort of confronting them all over again. And I think sometimes when you have to be reminded of that, I think when you play the team that you lost to, they feel even fresher. I remember that happened with the Panthers and the Broncos, and the Panthers had to play the Broncos week 1 the following season right after losing the Super Bowl, and it just made everything worse the whole year. So
something we're keeping our eye on this Sunday night. I just can't imagine what it would be like if the Falcons get up on an early lead and now we're all going to be waiting for the big comeback. Jenny Prentiss of the MMQB.com. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Time to talk a little college football. Our college football analyst Pete Mundo is here. Big weekend, Michigan trying to dethrone Penn State. It's the start of a rough stretch for the Nittany Lions. They've also got the Buckeyes and the Spartans. If they come out of these 3 games unscathed, do they overtake Alabama for number 1?
I think they do, Robin. The first rankings for the college football playoff is Halloween night. That will be before the Michigan State game, after the Ohio State game. If Penn State wins these 2 games, How do you not put them number one over Alabama, who has one ranked win this season against Florida State when DeAndre Francois got hurt in that season opener? They do have LSU next week. We'll see if they're still ranked by then. They're like 24th in the country right now. So it remains to be seen. But if I'm a voter, if I'm in that college football playoff committee and I have a vote, it's Penn State number one if they win these next 2 weeks.
That would be amazing. And for their Heisman candidate, Saquon Barkley. Let's talk about USC heading to South Bend. This is a huge game, obviously. The national appeal is there, but it's a pair of one-loss teams, so very little margin for error. If either of these two teams, whoever's going to win, will they get into the top four?
I think eventually, if one of these two teams only has one loss, they're in. I feel good about Notre Dame in the sense that they have 4 ranked teams left on their schedule. It's a pretty tough schedule. This week against USC, next week NC State, then Miami and Stanford towards the end of the season. That's a juggernaut when you look at it. I don't know if they go unscathed, but I do know if they get through this thing and have that one loss to Georgia by 1 point, which looks better every week, then you're going to have a really good case if you're Notre Dame come the end of the season, especially because we know the committee would love nothing more from a rating standpoint. They won't admit it, but they would love nothing more than to have Notre Dame in that college football playoff.
That's the best thing about the playoff rankings is the conspiracy theory.
Well, I'm a little bit of a conspiracy guy, I have to admit.
Thanks, Pete. And we're joined now by WWE legend, best-selling author, Mick Foley. His latest book, Saint Mick, My Journey from Hardcore Legend to Santa's Jolly Old Elf. We'll get to that in just a minute.
Sure thing.
But Ric Flair recently posted on Instagram his Mount Rushmore of the greatest wrestling superstars of all time. He had himself, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan, and The Rock. So it's now time for Mick Foley's Mount Rushmore.
Rick put himself up there.
Yeah.
He belongs up there. Rick's up there. Terry Funk is up there. Dynamite Kid is up there. And then we'll go with a modern day guy, the Rock and Steve Austin, right? Like kind of the two guys who really catapulted us into the stratosphere.
Chris Jericho was here not too long ago, of course, Y2J. He talked with you, Robin. He said he thinks The Rock would actually consider running for president in the year 2020. But could we see a Rock and Sock connection in the White House?
This is where the reason I slam the brakes on that is the moment I say Rock and Sock, it sounds like a joke. But I do believe Dwayne Johnson would make a very good candidate, not just because he's a wise man and you say, well, he has no experience in politics. Well, neither does the other guy. But The Rock surrounds himself with great people. He listens, and his work ethic is unparalleled. So I have no doubt that he would learn quickly, surround himself with great people, but no way, shape, or form am I on the ticket. I'll go to his events and talk at an event, but no, I'm not.
You're only stumping for the candidate. You're not going to be the candidate.
Who's beating The Rock in a debate anyway?
Nobody.
He'll ask the other candidate their name. It doesn't matter what your name is.
These other guys, give credit where it's due to the president. Like, the other guys were out of their league when it came to trying to compete with him in, verbally.
Yeah.
But The Rock's in another league altogether. I know because a lot of our best stuff was ad-lib as the Rock and Sock connection, unscripted. It was just whatever happened, and we were able to create a lot of joy that way. And then he's done fairly well for himself.
Do you think you don't get enough credit for your mic skills? You were incredibly entertaining, going head-to-head, one-on-one with the great one on the microphone.
It's not easy to do, by the way. Yeah, I do. I think I get plenty of credit. I do. But, I mean, that's a nice narrative to say. I was underappreciated. I was probably overrated, in general. Like, there may have been times when, like, a specific interview didn't get as much credit. But all in all, I don't think I was as good as people give me credit for being.
We know one of many of your famous moments, I would say, in the WWE is the Hell in a Cell going off the cage. And we just saw Shane McMahon do the same thing. I mean, you know the toll that took on your body. Did Shane take it too far?
He didn't seek my counsel. I give him all the credit in the world. He's probably the bravest guy I know. He's absolutely fearless. I wish he wouldn't do it. I hope he doesn't do it again. I really do, because there's no way. That's just the height. What is it? Weight times force equals impact, or speed times whatever. I'm not a mathematician. A lot of impact on landing. He's got children, and I hope he doesn't do it again.
Now, I remember where I was when you took those bumps forever, but there's a certain level that created maybe, or you know, that a bunch of those things created where it seems sometimes fans can't be pleased now. Did you ever think about that during your career, that you would set the bar so high where now people are putting themselves in serious danger?
I wanted to give people what I wanted to see out of matches. I knew what I wanted to see, and I was not a naturally gifted athlete, so I had to think outside the box. And I may have raised the bar, you know, to an unrealistic level, but then it all comes back to storytelling. It all comes back to getting people caught up in your character so that they care about the plight of a character they care about. So, you know, the WWE did decide at a certain point, you know, our Attitude Era is over, we're bringing a new era, you know, they went in a more PG direction, and worldwide they've never been bigger. So it was no doubt the right move, and guys have found new ways to connect with the audiences.
People always wonder if you're going to ever make a comeback. I mean, you've talked about this so many times about, you know, you have made comebacks when maybe you shouldn't have.
Right.
Is there ever a possibility maybe coming back on TV? Or?
Well, I can come back on TV in a in-ring role. Fortunately for me, the bat was kind of taken out of my hand by a couple of top neurologists who just said, you know, no, you're done.
You know, Robin and I talk a lot about professional football and whether or not the future of that is in danger because we know so much now about head trauma. Could the same thing be true for wrestling? No, because
fortunately we're able to change the rules at will. You know, we're able to change the game. Just we can ban headshots. You know, we can take away some of the things that I did, which were massive body bumps that we didn't know at the time would also jog your brain. So, and then now guys in training, when they do big moves, there's crash pads. The guys have safety apparatus for their heads. So I think WWE's really been, you know, a worldwide a leader. And you know, I'm pretty close with Chris Nowinski, who co-founded. It's now known as the Concussion Legacy Institute, but I prefer to call it by its old name, the Boston Center for Traumatic Encephalopathy, because I know if I can continue to say Boston Center for Traumatic Encephalopathy, then I'm okay. Yeah. And I am worried. I did take a lot back when we didn't know, and I didn't figure out that when they start occurring more often and the cause is not as deliberate, you know, that when I would, you know, you start making excuses for why you're getting, you know, seeing stars, and then I would go, they must have missed the camera shot, you know, and then it took a while to admit, like, whoa, it doesn't take much to hurt me anymore. I really regret, you know, the things I did post 2008, you know, when the writing was on the wall, I should have recognized it. And I hope, you know, I mean, I'm on the registry to donate my brain so that other people might learn from my mistakes. Every wrestler, I think, struggles with a way to feel like they did when they were in the ring, to feel that alive. You know, I told Mr. McMahon, I said, you have to understand that WWE is as close to the land of Oz as you can possibly get, you know, and that when people are away from it, you know, they miss it. And so there's a nice little learning curve in the book. It's a 5-year learning curve where I learned to appreciate that it's not the size of the crowd, you know, that matters. It's the impact you're making, you know. And so we're driving away on Christmas Eve with my sons, my head elf, and it was just a father and his two children, and this kind of a magical thing called a sneak a peek, where essentially I'm putting on a performance that for an audience I don't acknowledge is there. You know, they might be this far away from me, but I'm, you know, putting on having a conversation with my elf, talking to myself. We're driving away. We're about 3 blocks away. Get the text from the father, and he's just like, "We'll never, you know, as long as we live." And I said to Huey, I said, "I feel like I just had a pay-per-view match." And he goes, "But Dad, there were only 3 people there." And I said, "It doesn't matter. You know, it's about creating a moment." And so that's why this book felt like such a triumph to me. This character, and I felt like I had a story worth telling, because it's like there is a way out of the woods. You know, like. You know, you have to just find something you're equally passionate about.
Amazing perspective from Mick Foley. The new book is called Saint Mick, My Journey from Hardcore Legend to Santa's Jolly Old Elf, and it is a great read. Mick, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for taking such an interest, and this is a very thorough interview. I was.
Anytime we can sit down with you, Mick, it is absolutely our pleasure.
All right, thank you.
UFC Fight Night, Cerrone versus Till. It's on October 21st. A pleasure to have Cowboy Cerrone here. Your opponent's already throwing some barbs.
No, I'm
He's
sure.
already looking past you, talking about the next guy he's going to call out. What does that mean to you? I mean,
Nothing. It means nothing.
You've been fighting for so long.
So
this
long.
just rolls off your back?
Yeah, it's anymore. It's like whatever. Do whatever you got to do. You want to come at me crazy? You want to look past me? Go ahead, man. It's Saturday. You got to get in with me. So.
People think that you are a stepping stone. How does that make you feel?
I've been in this game a long time. This is gonna be my 34th Zuffa walk. So, and I've been in the top 10, top 5 most of my career. So, I don't know where they want to step to.
You've been in this game for so long, but when people call you out in this way, does it put a bit of a chip on your shoulder?
No,
I mean,
no.
You're saying you can ignore it. Is that really true?
Oh, yeah. I mean, not even ignore it, but I mean, you can't be the guy to fight anyone anywhere, and then when it comes time, be like, oh, except for that guy, it doesn't make sense to fight him, you know? So that's kind of, everyone's like, why are you fighting this guy? He's not even ranked. Doesn't make any sense. It's like, why not? Who cares? Let's go. Let's fight.
You mentioned how prolific your career has been, how long you've been fighting. Since 2011, you've had at least 4 fights a year. Yeah. This will be your 7th fight since February of 2016.
Hey.
Cowboy, we know a lot more now about the long-term effects here of fighting.
And we'll have 2 more this year.
Two more.
This one plus
Why
one in
do you want
December.
to have such a packed schedule?
Oh, I love it. There's nowhere place I'd rather be than in fighting somebody. I love it. Love it. It's like a sickness. It's my drug.
I'm not sure if you saw it, but Mark Hunt, he put out this letter on basically the Australian version of the Players Tribune. And he said, you know, I'm feeling some of the negative effects of fighting long term. You know, my speech is slurred. I'm starting to forget things like that. Dana White pulled him off the UFC Sydney card. Do you think that would prevent other people from actually being honest about what they're feeling moving forward because Hunt is no longer fighting on that UFC Sydney card?
I have no idea. I mean, it's the same thing with football. You know, those guys take hits and hits and hits. I mean, is that going to stop the boys from playing? I don't think so.
You're not sure? You don't think the next generation is going to feel differently about the NFL?
They might. They might. But I don't feel any different. You can tell me, Cowboy, you're probably going to get brain damage getting there pushing heads, especially with your 0 head movement skill set that you have. So, and I'm going to look at you and say, yes, ma'am, that's great. Thanks for the advice, but I'm going in there and giving it hell.
Yeah, how difficult is it to tell somebody what to do? I mean, we see NFL players get concussions. We on the outside can say you should sit down, you should think about retiring, but take us inside the mindset. When someone tells you what to do and what you should do, well, how does that make you feel?
That's why I think I'm a fighter in the beginning, because I'm never able to have somebody tell me what to do, right? Real jobs were hard for me to keep, and having someone be my boss and try and tell me so, yeah, that's why I'm independently employed.
Independent contractor, I think, is what the language is, right? The last time you were here at Sports Illustrated, you said winning a title wasn't as important as being a fighter people want to see in the octagon. I'm curious, have you noticed any changes in how fighters are trying to promote themselves since the rise of Conor McGregor?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he brought people that weren't even interested in the sport into the sport, right? Man, he did a good job, but there's a lot of people trying to mimic that and try and be him, and they're not him.
Do you think he should fight Diaz in his next match back in the octagon? You fought Diaz, is that the...
Yeah, but then you start wondering, like, is the UFC falling away from the structure of where we sit in rankings, or is it now just about pop shots and money fights, or are we actually some kind of organization? So the Diaz fight wouldn't make sense, because how is he even relevant? Oh, just because he was the last person to beat him? So, I mean, I think Ferguson obviously got the interim title, worked his way up the ladder, and he should be next.
What do you think about it, though? I mean, should the company just go for the biggest money fights? Would you rather fight the biggest money person you can as opposed
absolutely.
to the rankings? Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But absolutely, for sure. And if I'm a company, I'm like, hey, man, that fight will make us a little money. This fight will make us a lot of money. So we're going for a lot of money. I see it. I feel it, for sure.
Light heavyweight champ Michael Bisping was here, and we were talking about John Jones. If indeed everything plays out and it's a third positive test, Bisping said he thinks that Jones should be banned for life. Now, obviously, this is not a cut and dry. It's not black and white, but you've trained with Jones. You're his teammate in a lot of ways at Winklejohn. How do you feel about that? I mean, a third positive test, should he be able to get back in the octagon after that?
I mean, you feel like 5 years is a life sentence anyways in our sport, right? How I feel he should be reprimanded, I don't know. I'm not one to talk, but it's like, man, it's like the kid who just keeps on getting in trouble. Like, dude, are you going to learn? At what point are we going to have to tell you no more?
Do you think he's going to fight again in the UFC?
Yeah, I bet he will.
Put away championships popularity. I mean, how important is it for you to be in the conversation of the greatest fighters ever?
No, that's cool. I just want people to say, man, Cowboy, he's fighting. We got to watch. It's on Fight Pass. It's on free TV. It's on pay-per-view. We got to go figure out how to watch it on the moon. I just want to watch him fight. You know, that's what I want to be associated. I want to be part of that group of the people who are like, man, I love watching this dude fight. We don't miss it. To me, that's more important, you know, the legacy. Yeah.
How much longer do you want to be fighting?
5 more years.
5 more.
5 more.
And geez, my calculations there, I mean, that's a lot more fights.
Yeah,
that's
well,
like
I wanted 50, but I think I'm going to go try and shoot for higher than maybe 55 or 60 total before I'm done. UFC fights. Because 50's right. It's right there now. I can damn near reach it. So.
Well, we're looking forward to your next bout. Of course, that's UFC Fight Night, Cerrone versus Till, October 21st. Of course, Fox Sports is home to the Under-17 World Cup. It's happening in India, a place still on my bucket list. Quarterfinals are this weekend with the U.S. squaring off against England on Saturday at 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time on FS2, and not a moment later, Rob Stone from Fox Sports is with us to preview the action. Rob, for those who may have tuned out U.S. soccer after the men's national team failed to qualify for the World Cup, can you explain the significance of this match and what we should be looking out for?
Well, it certainly provides some hope for that nasty hangover that I think a lot of U.S. soccer fans are still fighting their way through right now. And all you need to do is look down and see a bunch of teenagers excelling in India and getting to the quarterfinals of another major tournament this year. The under-20 national team also made it to the quarterfinals of their World Cup earlier this year. So it clearly provides some hope for the future. John Hackworth is the manager. He's the young man who, well, he was a lot younger when he led the likes of Landon Donovan and DeMarcus Beasley and Bobby Convey deep into a youth World Cup as well. So of these kids, you know, not all of them are going to be at the next World Cup, the senior World Cup, the World Cup that really matters. But clearly it's the breeding ground and the fact that they're having success so far from home at a time where we really need it provides some optimism for the future for sure.
And you're talking about these future players. Is there one player in particular you're watching?
Do I have to limit it to one? I know it's such an easy thing. Like, just give me one, but I'm going to steal my time and I'm going to make it two. Tim Weah and Josh Sargent. Tim Weah, the son of George Weah, former World Player of the Year, African Player of the Century. This kid was electric. He had a hat trick in their game on Monday versus Paraguay, including an absolute stunning goal. Just go to YouTube or Google, or I'm sure it's on your website. It's got to be on ours as well. This young kid plays in Paris for PSG, has risen up the ranks there. He brings just flair and scoring. And then on the flip side, it's their captain, Josh Sargent, who's really doing double duty. This is a kid who is captaining the under-17 national team, but earlier this year, the St. Louis native played for the under-20 team at their World Cup and was really kind of a breakthrough player. He recently signed a deal in Germany with Werder Bremen, but he can't really join them until he turns 18, which is in February. So that young man there in the middle having a wonderful summer, and he represents certainly a bright spot for the future of the U.S. men's national team. And again, in a couple weeks in November, the U.S. men's national team has, one of those traditional soccer terms, a friendly with top 5 side Portugal, a game that will be on Fox Sports. And for me, it's going to be very interesting to see how many of these young under-17 players, how many of these under-20 players are going to make up that roster to take on a team that is one of the world's best and a team that is headed to yet another World Cup in Portugal.
Rob, you're painting a very optimistic picture here, and obviously we know that Christian Pulisic really is the future of U.S. soccer, at least as we stand here today. But overall, diagnose what is the future of soccer in this country and how strong is it?
It's amazingly strong. It's not our God-given right to attend every World Cup. That's why it's a World Cup. It's an elite tournament. Only 32 nations make it. 31 of them have to earn their way there. The other one just has to host the tournament. It is not for everybody. Great soccer nations miss out regularly. The Netherlands have missed out on the last couple. Italy's on the cusp of potentially missing out as well. So it is a great privilege to have earned the right to get there. It was a devastating blow, though. I don't think there's any hiding that fact. And I think in that darkness, because it really was dark, it was arguably the darkest day in U.S. men's soccer history. In that darkness, some light has to come about. And in that is some change. I think a restructuring to focus more on some of the youth. The players that failed to qualify for the men's senior World Cup were getting a little bit long in the tooth. The last two former managers, Jurgen Klinsmann, Bruce Arena, they would bluntly tell you that we were missing a generation of talent that once they qualified for the World Cup, which they both clearly anticipated they would do, that they knew they needed to go out and find some more talent, meaning, find some of these gems with the under 20 and the under 17 team and see, are they ready to play? Because these managers knew that there was some young talent in the works, and they knew that they needed them this coming summer. That opportunity is gone, but now the door is much more open and much wider for these younger players to come in and have a prominent role and see prominent playing time in national team camps and in these warm-up games, because their focus right now, unfortunately, is not 4 years or is not next summer. It's 4 years from next summer and the next World Cup in Qatar.
You mentioned a couple of the former coaches. Who should be the next head coach of the U.S. men's national team?
Yeah, loaded question. I don't want that question, frankly, answered until probably after next summer's World Cup, when you have the full pool of candidates at your disposal, assuming you don't have somebody lined up already. That makes perfect sense. I understand you don't want to waste too long in trying to rebuild this program back up. You want to make sure it's done with the right person, male or female. The other point is there's a U.S. soccer presidential election coming up in February. Sunil Gulati, the longtime U.S. soccer president, has said he's still going to run. Some candidates are starting to finally trickle in. I feel it's a lot like if you have an athletic director on the way out, that person should not be hiring the next head coach of a major program. If Sunil Gulati is not the man to continue to lead U.S. soccer, I don't want him making a head coach selection right now. The beauty of the selection process is that there are a couple really strong candidates right here in the United States. Tab Ramos, who coaches the under-20 national team, has wonderful pedigree as a player as well, was one of the best ever to wear the red, white, and blue. Peter Vermes, you could say the same thing for him. He's now coaching in Kansas City with Sporting KC in MLS. I think he's another great candidate here on our shores already. But there's a lot of intrigue and interest in being the head coach of a national team, particularly one of the value of the United States of America. And the coaches on foreign shores have heard for so long about how much talent is out here and the resources that are available to you. It's a very intriguing job. So I want the person who's going to be leading this federation for the long haul to make that pick. And that pick is going to have a long list of candidates. People are going to be calling in to say, please consider me. And here's my resume, because this is what I can do for this type of program.
That would be great if the U.S. could be picking from the top candidates in the world. Rob Stone, appreciate your perspective as always, and we're looking forward to this U.S.-England matchup. Of course, it's coming our way Saturday at 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time on FS2. Thanks, Rob.
You got it. Have a great day, guys.
And that's going to do it for this Friday episode of SI Now. We've made it to the weekend. Robin and I will be back on Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. But until then, stick with SI.com for all the latest news and headlines, and follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live.
It is peak sports season, after all.
So much to watch. I will watch so much TV this weekend.